Is a sense of entitlement killing your team culture? So this is something that's been going on for a while. I don't think it's ever not been there. It's just one of those things of it's become more prevalent and we talk about it more. And there's also a big value shift that's occurred in the workforce. So, the old workforce had a promise that when they worked for you and your company, that they would get compensated and have the ability to lean on what their compensation was to fulfill other goals, like owning a house or, saving for retirement or all these sorts of factors. We know that the cost of living has changed, the way that we work in the world has changed. And so those promises are gone. And what what replaces that is sometimes a sense of entitlement. Well, what's in it for me? Because what used to be in it for them is gone. It doesn't exist. And so there's what I would call a justified concern amongst the workforce to be like, why am I here? And then there would be the issue of just straight up entitlement. So let's kind of split apart the difference between those two things. The the first one is the justified concern. What's in it for them? We have a value-driven workforce. And so a value-driven workforce is fundamentally looking at what matters, what's your meaning and purpose, and do I find alignment with that? And so if you don't have a value-driven company, one that has a clear set of ethos and what type of people you want in it, and what the team culture and what the individual behaviors in that team culture look like, then you're going to end up with lots of chaos, entropy, and an uncertainty around that. So that's the first thing to solve on that side. Easier said than done. There's lots of stages to make that happen. Now let's look at actual entitlement. Actual entitlement is a negative trait. It is something that is an internal flaw in an individual, and it's unfortunately a little bit contagious. So if you end up with a team where certain individuals have a lot of voice and they have a sense of entitlement, that can then cascade. And if you don't have a set of clear values and structure around what it is that actually matters to your business, then entitlement can basically just start to permeate and it becomes a exponential growth in your business. And then you're like, what happened? My team is acting completely surreal. What's the persona and the archetype of someone who suffers from entitlement? And then the moment you start to see this, how do you nip it in the bud? So the first thing about someone who tends to be entitled is that they have a high sense of self-justice. So they actually have justice as a value. The thing is that the justice is not being held to a level of overall justice. It's like justice for me. What's in it for me? It's very sort of self-oriented approach. And if the thing about values is that when a value is challenged, you start to see the opposite of it very quickly. So someone who values justice will see injustice absolutely rapidly. And so if someone has a high sense of self-justice, they will start to see injustice towards them as the self very, very rapidly. So that's internal quality trait number one. It's when a strength has been pushed too far. So they have the internal value of justice, that internal value is pushed too far. They also have a self-reflective approach, and those two things together elevates into this high sense of self-justice. Entitlement, ingredient number one. Entitlement, ingredient number two, is a low levels of general gratitude. They don't feel gratitude for others or what others have done. So they'll de-escalate it and generalize the impact that other people have done on them. And they'll kind of be like, yeah, well, you know what? It's like, this kind of never really played out for me. No one supported me. But I mean by generalization is that they'll generalize and make very vague statements of direct impact on how other people maybe help them or any sort of reciprocal quality there as well. The third one is that the internal judge is very, very high. So an internal judge is definitely going to be something that is going to come up and it's going to cause a lot of issues. This other persona in front that's constantly like judging, well, is this or isn't it? Is it or isn't it? And everything that someone says, a boss, a leader, they're always going to be judging that person, what's being said, what the situation is, how does this affect me? And so the internal judge is really, really high. There's this imbalanced ratio of what is considered fair. So fair becomes another miscalibrated value. It's kind of tied to this idea of justice. And they're always looking for fairness. And the thing is that with the rule of reciprocity, this idea of reciprocity is I did something for you, so you do something for me. Their whole thing is, well, I'm doing this much for you and I want this much in return. So it's a very sort of taking as opposed to giving type of mindset. You gave this, but you want this. For them, they're seeing it the reverse. They're like, I gave you this and I'm only getting this. So it's flipped, and that becomes another issue. At its worst state, it becomes in line with what is called the vengeance urge, or that idea of vengeance becoming an internal trait. Vengeance is considered one of the 15 core traits that drive and motivate people. And what happens is that vengeance is always counterbalanced with something that's worse than what was originally done to that person. So someone did something like this, and then you are like, well, I'm going to get back at them. But you don't get back at them at an evil level of reciprocity. You get back at them at a little bit more. And then that turns into this sort of like growing vengeance quality. When it comes to entitlement, that same mechanism is happening. They're like, well, you gave me this when I gave you this. So then I'm going to feel more entitled again. And then you end up giving, and then they feel more entitled, and you give and more entitled. So it turns into a wicked cycle. So that's the entitlement mindset. How do you get people out of it? Well, you got to call it out. And you have to create a culture that is not based on that. You have to create a culture of meritocracy where you're actually rewarding people's good efforts. You have to show and highlight when people are fulfilling the values in a way that you think is valuable to the company and based off of your ethos and values and mission statement. And you have to just be aware that when it starts to get into the company and into your team culture, that you got to do work to make sure that you have the right systems, the right leadership to mitigate against the entitled mindset. If you're someone who's in the workforce, challenge yourself and find out, are you entitled? It's like, if you're working for a company and you're giving and you're not getting reciprocal results on the other side from the company, then you're in the wrong company. But if you take that same hyper vigilant mindset and go into a company where they actually are rewarding good effort, but you never feel like it's enough, then you got to check that mindset and get that sorted. So that's a little bit about entitlement and team dynamics.